Boeing 767 hits the waves at more than 200 miles per hour. Hijackers had forced the pilot to head for Australia, and now the jet has run out of fuel. The pilot attempts an emergency landing. The left wing of the 767 skims across the water, causing the plane to swing violently and break apart. Now, debris from the wreckage is strewn across miles of ocean. Minutes after landing in Okinawa, Japan, engine number 2 is already engulfed in flames. In such an emergency, commercial airliners are required to evacuate within 90 seconds. One by one, passengers on board slide to safety. As they see the fire, they realize just how dangerous the situation really is. Beneath the engine, leaking fuel is ignited. They realize that this plane could explode at any moment. Even though the inside of the plane is rapidly filling with heat and smoke, the evacuation remains orderly. Little do the passengers know that the only thing separating the 2 tons of highly flammable jet fuel from the fire is a thin sheet of metal. Passengers make their way down the inflatable slides and scramble for safety. Some risk their own lives to help others. In an attempt to buy the remaining passengers and crew members on board some time, one brave rescuer tries to suppress the flame. But his handheld extinguisher is no match for the spreading fire. Once the extinguisher is spent, he has no choice but to retreat. As the size of the fire increases, flames get closer to reaching the fuel tanks. The crew begins to evacuate. Of Kansas, all systems are go as the 2-man crew prepares for takeoff. The B-2 thunders down the tarmac and the nose begins to lift. It looks like a picture-perfect takeoff. It's only when the B-2 begins to lose altitude that there's any indication that something is wrong. The pilots struggle to gain control. Then, just above the runway, the left wing begins to dip. Seconds later, the $1.4 billion aircraft is lost in a cloud of smoke. The slow pan of the security camera reveals the devastation. As the jet goes down, the 2-man crew has no choice but to eject. Both pilots sustain minor injuries and are released from the hospital. An investigation concludes that moisture in the electronics caused the B-2's computer to malfunction. As a result, the pilots lose complete control of the bomber. It's hard to imagine that a little condensation caused over $1.4 billion in damage, reminding us that even technological marvels can be destroyed in seconds. After 5 hours of performing high-altitude maneuvers, the plane comes in for a landing, just as the computer software fails. Unable to regain control, and with no time to eject, he is trapped in the cockpit. The horrific crash demolishes the plane. It continues to tumble hundreds of yards before stopping in a field. Flame retardant foam is sprayed across the burning jet. Within moments, the flames are extinguished. The test pilot sustains only minor injuries. The same pilot is once again behind the controls of another Saab JAS-39 Gripen fighter. This time it's not a prototype, but the first production plane off the assembly line. After a short time in the air, the plane becomes unresponsive, and the control system fails again. A wooded park, and no one is hurt. The 3 propeller blades on the left wing snaps off and is thrown 3,000 feet across the field. The breakage causes an explosion in the engine, and the plane stops. Outside, the pilots are unwilling to jump down 17 feet and take their chances through the billowing smoke and fire.
Get out of there! Chris, get her away from there!
Is everybody out? Yes, pilot!
Their decision pays off, and they head to safety.
Get the hell back away from me, Mike!
Finally, firefighters arrive, but it's too late to salvage the vintage aircraft. Damage is widespread, and the 50-year-old plane is a $100,000 total loss. When the propeller snapped, parts of the blade flew into the engine and ignited the fire. Although these skydivers never broke the world record, they did get the unexpected thrill of jumping out of a burning plane. His first stunt of the day will be a spectacular air combat maneuver known as the Split S. The slightest miscalculation can end in tragedy. He's drastically underestimated the altitude needed to perform this challenging dogfight maneuver. Descent about 1,000 feet too low. Halfway through the loop, Strickland realizes his mistake. He tries desperately to pull up the nose of the F-16, but it's beyond the plane's capabilities. Unable to pull out of the maneuver in time, Captain Strickland has no choice but to eject. A split second before the $20 million F-16 explodes into a ball of flames. The jet fighter careens down the runway for over 200 yards, and the engine over 100 more. A last look. Then, around their side yard, they see a neighbor's house engulfed in flames. Barely visible in the fire is the wreckage of an F-117 stealth fighter. How did this aviation disaster happen? Just moments before, spectators at the Glen Martin State Airport were being treated to a flyby from the Air Force's once top-secret jet fighter, the F-117 Nighthawk. Then, as the stealth fighter gets ready to make another pass, the jet suddenly breaks apart. The wrecked plane plummets to the ground as the spectators watch in disbelief.
Everybody, please stay where you are.
Finally, the pilot is able to eject.
We've got a shoot.
But the empty fighter is on a collision course with the neighborhood below.
We'll try and keep you in line. Just stay where you are, folks. Everything's fine.
But everything is far from fine, as the plume of black smoke rises in the distance.
Might want to get a little bite to eat. And,
Seconds later, the pilot slams to the ground in the yard next door. It isn't long before fire crews arrive and try to contain the fire of the jet fuel-soaked house. As the plane taxis down the runway, it suddenly veers off course and heads straight toward a group of people. The cameraman runs for cover. Luckily, the pilot manages to take off, barely missing terrified bystanders.
he's going to crash.
But a serious problem remains. The first sign of trouble occurs when the pilot narrowly misses the bystanders. Then, once airborne, problems with the plane become more severe. As the left wing dips, the plane loses lift. Called a tip stall, the plane literally slips sideways out of the sky. Firefighters arrive almost immediately, quickly hosing down the plane to prevent a fire. When it's safe, medics carefully attend to the wounded pilots. A photograph of the airplane taken by a spectator moments before the accident shows a nylon strap attached between the left elevator and the rudder. This strap should have been removed prior to takeoff and was the sole cause of the crash.
It's going to crash.
To lighten the load. Stefan rolls as the helicopter strains to lift off in the thin mountain air. Then, as it passes the ridge, the group senses something is wrong. The former passengers watch in horror.